GPT for Business and Life. I have a really cool founder on the podcast today. And what's really cool, what they're working on is changing the face of legal and law. And if you know me, that's like something close to my heart. So today I would like to welcome Kimo Gendel. Kimo is the founder of a company called Fortuna Insights. Fortuna Insights is a large language model based platform for lawyers and those that are interested in using AI in the legal field to do research, to write briefs and do contracts and all types of great stuff. I don't want to give it all away. I want to first welcome you to the show, and thanks for building a really cool platform.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So give us a little bit of background. Why law? Why AI?
Good question. Why law? Well, every social science major is going to give you some made-up answer for their law school interview. But for me, really, I was doing research already in law. I just thought the methodology of conducting law was ripe for revolution. In fact, actually, this started as an academic paper called SCOTUS AI. And my dream was to open source everything because I believe everyone should have access to the law. Right now, there's kind of this pseudo regime in the federal system they call PACER. States are very different depending where you are. That makes law very inaccessible. And even when people have access to the physical, raw legal text, it's hundreds of pages. And I mean, even if you're trying to fit that into a generic context window, you have some cases out there that won't even fit in some of the larger ones. Maybe Gemini with their million token context windows can handle. But even then, that is a massive pain point to the average consumer who has no access to the law. And it's a pain point to lawyers who are trying to compare and figure out which cases are actually available. So Kenny and I, we've been friends since kindergarten. We were on this barbecue road trip. We were debating the best way to build this product. And what we figured out was it costs a ton of money to do this. So let's make a startup so everyone can get access to it.
That is awesome. So what I have definitely seen just in my own experience over the last year is that if you're using words, images, numbers, or sounds, that WINS framework, you're going to be impacted by AI. And there's probably no other cottage industry that uses more text and words in a professional setting than law. So it's this cottage industry that I think is going to rapidly change. I definitely think that there is difficulties with accessing some of the databases that you mentioned too. So typically before AI, what would you consider like the modus operandi or the MO of a normal lawyer versus what could happen if they implemented AI into their schedule?
Sure. So the typical, this is actually a great segue into kind of the market dynamics here. So there are other legal tech platforms, but the majority of the market is controlled by a legal duopoly, the Westlaw Lexis duopoly, that is basically just functions through a search bar. They have a couple comparative metrics, but you're not looking fact through fact by each case unless you're spending weeks doing it. And most lawyers, and honestly most clients, can't afford to spend that time doing that. So what they do instead is they kind of have to quickly skim, they have to read through, they have templates they use, but that prevents you from actually accessing the important debates behind the law, the policy choices behind certain reasons to favor a textual canon, for example. And it obfuscates the whole system. So it actually, ironically, the more transparent the system became in that regime, the less transparent it became in practice, because there was just so much information, so much gray noise. We actually see that with consumers nowadays. You get shoved with so many advertisements, nothing seems real. In that, you have access to everything, you have access to nothing. And that was what happened to a lot of lawyers. Now, AI helps us solve this because it helps us compare case to case, one by one, quickly query through all of your answers, and then pull the relevant rules. In law, we have a system known as IRAC, which is Issue Rule Application Conclusion. And actually conducting that in a way in which you have proof points between cases that are really thorough, really dynamic, and they can apply to a variety of fact patterns was an incredible pain point. That's what haunts every 1L in law school. Let me tell you, Harvard is not unique for that. We spend weeks searching through the Lexis and Westlaw systems to try to conduct that. Now, there have been other AI platforms that have tried to do that, including through Lexis. And they've done, in my opinion, a decent job, but they're not affordable for the average user.
Accessibility is a definite big deal. And it sounds like you're trying to solve that hallucination problem that we heard about last year with the lawyers, a couple different legal suits that one I think was like Michael Cohen, I believe that was like Trump's lawyer at one point, filed something and he got his hand slapped pretty hard. And then there was a filing for an airline that I think was like a personal injury case. And they submitted their notice for probably some type of civil action, but it quoted fake law cases because the AI was really good at quoting law cases, but it wasn't very good at having real information to pull from. So you're sort of bridging that gap for.
Yes, absolutely. So we have a database of over 9 million cases where we've actually gone through every case, extracted the rules, and then we can run RAGs on that. And actually ours is more of a raft because there's a fine tune involved as well, depending on which part of the website or app you're on. So yes, we provide all that real legal data. And as the answer generates, we have a button that says read cases. You can click on it and you can read the actual information. And we don't charge, here's an important part too. We don't charge you credits for doing your basic due diligence. Yes, we do charge a little bit to help with the AI systems. We use only our own in-house systems. We use open source models exclusively. But when it comes to due diligence, we encourage you that every single time you should be doing that from a single accessible point.
So you threw out some major terms that I don't think a lot of people, especially maybe if they're familiar with law, what they even really mean. So RAG is a way that you can train an AI on specific information. And then you mentioned RAFT. So that's not just retrieval augmented generation, it's retrieval augmented generation with what you mentioned, fine tuning. So you're saying that you have some tools that not only is the information going to be accurate and based upon probably state-based cases or federal cases, it's going to also have the ability to have some fine tuning in that that sort of mythology that you mentioned. So it sort of stays in a very accessible way, what it sounds like for lawyers or those not strong in AI. So this sounds like it's a low code, no code sort of opportunity for those that want to use the platform. And it sounds like it's at a price that's accessible if you're only charging for some tokens and you're giving some due diligence.
Consumers can get the product for as low as $10 a month.
Wow.
Yes.
Like
access to the entire United States for $10. Now, to be fair, we have extra security requirements for lawyers because lawyers have expectations of greater security. So the lawyer price is a little higher. It's $300 a month, but we believe everyone should have access for what they need it for. Lawyers need a lot more credits. They need a lot more product development and features on our end. Consumers are a little more simple. So we offer it for everybody.
That's very interesting. So you mentioned too that you've used private models. And when I think private models, and I think if like in the legal field, I'm thinking like my data must be secure. My client's data must be secure. So if you're using an open source model, that means you're probably hosting it in a secured environment that you really care about that. And you're not going to be sharing it to these larger foundational models that may or may not happen, but at least for sure in your platform, you can absolutely say in the lawyer version that your data is safe, secured. Are you SOC 2 compliant? Or are you still working on that?
We're getting our certification very soon on SOC 2 compliance, but we use all the industry standards. We just don't have the fancy certification yet. But yes, so we host everything in-house.
Perfect. That's a big deal. I think that's an excellent thing to do, and it gives you a lot more opportunity to train your model and know what's inside of it.
Absolutely.
So with this, you've started this platform. How long have you been working on it?
Yeah, so this project we've been working on for several years in terms of the actual difficult parts, figuring out how to extract rules, figuring out what sentiment means in relation to a case, and how to predict outcomes based on it. So this project's been a long time in coming, but a lot of the recent tools have enabled us to extract information much faster.
So with that, I'm assuming there's a lot of data that you have to cover. Are you covering all 50 states right now? Or are you just in the United States?
Yes, all 50 states within the United States. We cover state, federal, and tribal law. Most of the tribes are uploaded, so the tribal's almost there. We also cover all the statutes, so it's not just case law, it's statutory law. There are some municipality law still that we need to work on because, scraping that and getting that accurate. But even Westlaw and Lexis don't offer extremely comprehensive access to small municipal like water codes, for example. but everything else is generally there.
Wow. So you've really collected and curated a training set that's of all of the data across the United States, which is pretty phenomenal. Who would be the ideal user? You mentioned that it could be like just regular people, but it could be law firms as well. Who are you sort of building this for?
Our goal is to eventually connect the consumer to the lawyer. So the consumer should be asking questions, getting educated, and then they can get connected to a lawyer, and we can rate the different lawyers based on their cost, based on their jurisdiction, based on how often they win. And then we can connect you, and you can like bid on lawyers. And that solves one of the big problems for consumers, which is how do you access reliable legal advice? And the fact is, currently, the American Bar Association has monopoly on legal advice. It is not legal for me to offer that. We don't offer legal advice. But what we can do is we can create the tools that enable people to lower the price of legal advice. And creating that competitive environment is really important for helping the average consumer.
So that's awesome. And with that, I think it's probably important to be said too, like in my experience, like I'm sort of known as being the first person to use AI to win a pro se sort of argument in a municipal court. I got a misdemeanor citation dismissed for one of prosecution. And I was able to use AI, but I was a strong AI user. So I was able to force train in my little jurisdiction some information and get a case sort of won, and I was super impressed. But I knew that that barrier of entry was a little higher than most people would be comfortable taking. One thing I did notice in that wasn't the capability of the AI model, which was very interesting and very good and obviously helped. But it's not like exactly what you said. It's not legal advice. I still had to sign off on it. It was still my work product as a pro se representative. So I used my thoughts, my ideas, rag sort of statutes, and created some filings, which was really good. The other thing the AI couldn't do, and in my jurisdiction, you can't wear like an earpiece in that you're talking to an AI. So know that if you do go this way, an oral argument is still an oral argument. You have to show up if you're doing this in a pro se environment. I do say that that's why there should be caution, and B, that's why you should use lawyers. And if they're using an AI, I would prefer that lawyer at this point, because their billable hours would have to go down, right?
Yeah. I do predict a future with that. Now, I think if we get into the philosophy of where this is moving, I think at the lower levels, that's going to be true. I think in some ways, there's going to be a nuclear arms race towards the best models. So in some ways, you might actually see billables go up because now lawyers are really engaged in what the substantive arguments are, trying to disprove empirical findings. Like, for example, the classical, originalist challenge is in digging through all these historical documents, finding out what's actually relevant, what they believe the law was at the time. So I think the top big law lawyers are going to find inventive ways to create interesting new cases. But I agree with you. I think generally for most cases, it will become much easier to handle them.
Sure. So at least the paperwork side. So I think that, we've talked about this awesome product, but it still seems like, what is it? What does this mean? Why don't we go ahead and give them a little bit of an overview of your platform, if you don't mind?
Sure, absolutely. So let's try just asking it a question. You want to ask about Ohio statutes?
Oh, would I ever? Okay. So let's say I just filed a request for a 9E at the appellate court, which means I want to correct the record that was transmitted from the common pleas court to the appellate court. So that's should be enough, hopefully, in your system that it's an Ohio Revised Code 9E appellate procedure. So this is going to be really impressive.
9E. I think it probably will. So first, it's going to try to figure out your jurisdiction, because obviously jurisdiction is incredibly important. Yes. Also, provide the statutory authority and any case law.
And could you read what the output was right there?
Yeah. Let's just start by making sure your relevant legal information was the correct jurisdiction. It looks like you want to pull information from Ohio state law. Is this correct? And then I told it yes.
That's awesome. Step by step.
Yep. Now it's going to try to pull the relevant statutes, because statutory law comes first, and then case law, right? Case law interpreting the statutory law. and then hopefully it'll pull both. And then once it starts generating, you will actually be able to see the cases that we pulled on our end. So I'll let it generate a little. And yep,
Mhm.
it's going over the exact rules of procedure governing that transmission.
I'm a pretty good question asker. That was a very pointed question. You might not get that unless you're talking to a lawyer. So
Yeah,
this is very
exactly.
impressive.
Yeah. And so it's just giving you a general overview, right? We didn't ask it for
Yep.
much. We just asked it what it did. And maybe we can even read some cases it pulled. So it looks like it relied on the general statute.
Mhm.
And then it also relied on the specific cases. And then you can always ask, like, if you don't want to read this whole thing, right? It can be a little messy. You can just ask it anything about it. So that's one case. Here's another one. Because oftentimes, and we need to fix some of the text, that's fine. We'll work on the UI UX. But you'll be able to ask anything you want about these cases. And we can ask if you want to talk about the case, to get into some specifics on case law.
Okay, so there's a specific case called Duncan versus Middlefield, and it's about the physical characteristics of a property in zoning. But I know it's Duncan, Duncan, versus I think Middlefield. I don't know the exact spelling on Middlefield, almost like it sounds, I would think.
Well, let's see if it just pulls it.
I think that's what's amazing about these AIs. Like you can spell a word incorrectly, and it usually can find what you're talking about. The fact, though, that you're using your own model to do this, open source, that you've really decided to own and understand every part of your platform, I really find it commendable, because that's a hard challenge technically to just run your own model and keep up. But to be able to have a very clean case database as well, it appears to be a very unique product that, for me, I know would save so much time. Like each time I would ask it a question in the AI, I'd have to go and find a PDF and then upload the PDF, and had to be really, really intentional. Where yours, if you're just able to ask questions and it's pulling it out right now, that's phenomenal. You've done all the hard work.
Yep. And then, of course, you can go read about the case. And I think this is the right case. I don't know any. I'm not claiming to be an expert in Ohio State property law. But it looks like this is pulling the correct case, and it's going to give you exactly what happened in the case, the facts. Again, we work on always IRACing it, so it's very simple for you. You just want to know the issue. You want to know the rule applied. You want to know how then that rule was applied to the facts, and then you want the basic conclusion.
So this is totally awesome. So you're able to do some upfront research just off the questions that I threw at you that were very targeted, statutes and a specific case. What am I missing out of a good question? Like, what's some functionality in your platform that we might not be talking about yet?
Yeah. So again, we went into the read cases, and I really think it's underestimated, the shepherdization feature. So we are still building this, but what you will eventually be able to do is click one button, and it will bring up your case that you want to cite along with the facts, and then it'll bring up cases that things aren't analogous, meaning the other side will likely bring up against you, and then you'll be able to compare them fact by fact, say why your case is more relevant. Maybe their cases is more relevant. You want to know that. And eventually, we will also be able to match it by judge. So you'll be able to look at like judge-specific predictions and access all of that from a single $10 consumer profile. You'll also be able to generate templates. So templates are coming out soon, and we're facilitating user feedback on that. So you'll be able to automatically write complaints, automatically write summary judgment motions, automatically write dismissal motions, everything.
So you had a really solid education, and like sort of the structure of the legal side, like notices and appeals and motions and things like that. And from that sort of, educational background, some people go into law, have that background. It becomes sort of a templatized business, I think, in a lot of these firms. And to be able to now enable people to participate in something that was truly an area for like the well-educated, where it was almost preventative. If you weren't in a legal law, if you weren't a lawyer yourself or a paralegal, it was almost unapproachable. Having templates will further accelerate your just capability in the platform if you're just a regular pro se, just looking to understand sort of how to navigate the legal landscape.
Precisely.
But you're thinking too that if you are a law firm and you're a very solid law firm and you're already a strong performer, a system like yours would even elevate their capabilities?
Precisely. Yes. In fact, I think eventually it's going to get to the point, we've been talking to some big firms about this actually, where we will be able to build templates for them using knowledge graphs and looking at what's worked in the past. And so you'll have live updated templates that adjust to judge preferences.
Oh, that is phenomenal. And I know you mentioned to me a little bit about theoretical arguments. So not like anybody wants to really go too far off the rails and present stuff that doesn't really have a precedent, but you do have like this concept of maybe not scoring a different style of argument, but definitely one that sort of has an overview of its effectiveness, maybe in court. Is that?
Yeah, definitely. So prediction models, great point. We've actually been working with, we're going to announce soon the details on this, but we've been working with a litigation fund. Our idea one day is we're going to connect the consumers to the lawyers, and the lawyers, if the consumers can't afford it, are going to be able to access our litigation fund and get financial help on their case. So everyone will be able to pursue litigation equitably.
Wow. So this is a paradigm shift in the whole legal movement. We're 15 months into this generative AI revolution. And in that time frame, you have changed what used to be that first initial meeting, possibly with a lawyer, into a $10 payment to at least ask some questions that you might typically ask a lawyer in that first initial meetup and have some general understanding. And from that, you have that choice of going with a law firm and getting representation, which is still a very important thing. There's a lot of advantages to having a lawyer. So I'd never encourage anybody to go pro se, because I even found that if you have a lawyer, there's ways that they can communicate with the other legal team, where if you're pro se, you can't. So make sure you know your rights. But this being said, for me, I had a zoning issue for an accessory structure. I built a 96 square foot shed on my property that's just caused all types of havoc and all these issues in legal. But it was such a small problem that I wouldn't ever approach a law firm to pay, because it's not that big of an issue where I'd want a $20,000 legal bill. I would have just built a bigger structure and connected it to my house, or, there's all different ways, to spend money properly. But this gives the person now some flexibility to maybe participate now in this legal process. For me, I find that to be an amazing individual, almost right. We're talking about our rights as people and persons in the United States. So
the ancient Romans had this ideal. They had the form, where everyone was able to read the basic plebiscites of that society, what was passed, right, by the people, what the Senate had passed. People had access to the law. The idea that the law was connected to the common good was rich within our tradition. And positivism, to some extent, the irony is, with all of its transparency and the bonuses to how we use tools of interpretation, it's obfuscated everything. No one can read the 1 million+ pages of regulations we're subject to. So I think this is a real revolution in terms of reconnecting people to our civil obligations.
That's awesome. And you don't have to know Latin at this point.
Exactly. That's a big plus.
So this is just totally cool. I think that, I wish I could have used your platform earlier, but with that, I know the power of AI, and I wanted to see how far it could be pushed. And personally, on my journey, I saw that AI is going to have a major legal impact. Meeting your team at Fortuna Insights, it's amazing to see that you're productizing it and you're making it available to people to operate. Like, we have this QR code, we have your website. if they go to this QR code, they're going to get a free account. They're going to be able to try it out. There's going to get some credits. It's not the super legal plan, but if you are a lawyer, you should definitely check it out. That way you get a little bit of a taste of what the future holds, and you can always roll into your law firm's safe, ethical, responsible AI solution. And you could probably do it today. If I were a lawyer, I would think that if I could take in more cases because I could execute on more cases, and I have this sort of capability, I can only imagine that the bottom line on my business would increase because my productivity would increase. So that's my viewpoint. I'll turn it over to you just to give one more overview of why people should choose this, why now, and why choose Fortuna Insights.
If you want a safe, in-house, effective solution where you can conduct all of your due diligence, get connected to other people in the legal ecosystem, and read case law where it was intended to be read, then Fortuna is the place to go. There's no hidden fees anywhere. It's just very straight up what you're getting for what you're doing. And you can upload any contracts you want. You can have the bot analyze, and all of that with our trusted proprietary system.
So look at that. Check it out. Brought to you here first at ChatGPT for Business and Life. Please check them out. Let us know how you utilize it. Please test it out. Let us know in the community what your thoughts are. And we would love to continue to follow up with updates with your platform. So until then, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this new paradigm shift in legal with us. Fortuna-Insights. Check it out. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody, for